After the last couple days of steady upward momentum, HEX has finally stumbled and dipped. Is it time to run for the hills, get emotional, panic sell, fall for a lot of the FUD that's going on right now, shaking out all of those weak hands? Absolutely not. This is crypto, folks. Welcome to the crypto world where things are hella volatile. It isn't just one straight line up to the right, or the right, whichever way we're doing it. It comes with peaks and troughs. Those of us who have been around for a little while know this. We know to hold our true course. This is why we look through somewhat of a macro lens when analyzing the crypto landscape as a whole and analyzing the projects that we're getting into. We know what the goal is, we know where we're starting, and we understand that it's somewhat of a tumultuous journey along the way, albeit trending in the right direction. Now, why has HEX specifically dipped today? Well, and there'll be other dips, but right now, Kraken, a centralized exchange, hot on the heels of another centralized exchange in Gemini, failing to report assets appropriately to the SEC. So they had a staking protocol that they rolled out to all of their community and failed to represent it in the way that it should have been represented, and therefore they owe a tax bill on that, or essentially a fine and a fee now rolled on top of that in the form of $30 million. A drop in the ocean to something like Kraken. But however, that news in itself has apparently been enough to force some people to sell out of their positions. I cannot stress this enough. There's a reason we don't invest in every single coin that comes across the table. There's a reason we take our time to do our due diligence. And this is one of those reasons. A lot of the weak hands, especially the newer folks, the traders, the folks who are a lot more fickle than they perhaps should be and making life difficult for themselves, they are the ones right now who are selling out of their position. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The more we're able to build in any project that we're involved in, a more of a solid community who has that joint vision, and there hasn't really been any negative catalyst that should amount to mass selling, well, that's kind of a good position to be in. It gives us more strength for the leg up and the next leg up and the next leg up. Now, it is my belief, again, that this FUD with the SEC, some of these shenanigans going on with staking protocols, play very heavily into the positive HEX narrative going forward. You've heard my thoughts on this before. I believe that in this coming bull cycle, there's going to be a big emphasis put on privacy and security and being in control of your assets. Anyone getting involved in a staking protocol on a centralized exchange wants their head read. I don't think that's a very good idea at all. And we've talked so many times about the risks inherent in that. Not your keys, not your coins, not your tokens, not your money, not your assets. We know this. You're not in control of your own assets when staked in a decentralized manner, hence why HEX is so powerful. There is a big reason why a lot of the HEX influencers out there, a lot of the folks, the professionals, the traders, the people in this community are speaking so favorably about that decentralized staking that HEX incurs. It's tied to your own private wallet, which means you have full control. So if something does happen, even if it's something just a surface level veneer bit of FUD, like the SEC charging a protocol, charging an entity with not reporting correctly, well, you're still isolated and protected from those things happening going forward, which is why HEX is such a powerful tool. Now, I really do think that, again, over the coming weeks, over the coming months, we will very quickly get back to that upward trajectory. This is still very much the early beginnings of that trajectory. I think we reach an all-time high on eHEX, let alone what's actually going to happen with pHEX. I have read the comments, and I've seen a few folks out there who have asked me to maybe dig in a little bit more on my, let's say, early evaluation of what's going to do better, pHEX or eHEX. And while I think, again, as always, there are certainly more nuances to that conversation, I'm certainly okay giving you my take on this right now. Now, I think I'm a big believer that as we start getting closer to that mainnet launch, we go through all the announcements and the catalysts that we've talked about, I really do think that eHEX is going to see an all-time high. Again, I understand that's a pretty bullish sentiment to make. However, we've had a little tiny taste just very recently about how quickly HEX price appreciation can happen, let alone when we have some of those very, very solid announcements coming out. So we have firm dates behind it, and the general populace and the HEX community really get a sense for PulseChain and PulseChain coming to fruition. Then I think that it's inevitably going to inject a lot of that economic energy back into HEX. So I think we'll see that all-time high on eHEX. As we get closer to the launch, and as the launch actually happens, I really do think that pHEX could be a good investment opportunity. Now, again, of course, this is speculation. Nobody understands or nobody knows what to expect, how quickly parity between the two chains, between eHEX and pHEX can happen, what kind of value pHEX is going to have out of the gates. But you can certainly apply a little bit of common sense here. We've already seen the trajectory of eHEX from its very early infancy up until its all-time highs, back down, and now it's climbing back up again. Knowing this, while I wouldn't certainly advise in any ratio trading to begin with, simply because we don't have enough data yet, as I've mentioned before, to understand what a good ratio trade is between any of these assets yet, I do think that once the dust has settled and we start seeing where that pHEX price is settling, if it's very much below where an eHEX price either currently is or relatively speaking to where the eHEX price went, I think we make the call in the moment based on sentiment, based on narrative. Of course, we want to make sure that all the decisions that we're making are very relevant in the moment. We can't possibly make all the decisions way in advance because that's not how the world works, unfortunately. But I do think you keep a close eye on what that price performance of pHEX is doing, because buying in earlier on a pHEX could definitely make way for some very good potential going forward. Whether it's as good as PulseX, PulseChain, eHEX, it's yet to be seen. But the only early analysis that I would encourage you doing is to see what the price is relative to eHEX and then kind of make that call yourself. Remember, Ethereum is arguably or definitely the most popular blockchain, outside of Bitcoin, of course. Ethereum has a lot of interaction with the chain. So it's not going anywhere. And certainly when Shanghai happens, certainly going forward as well, as we start seeing more implementations into the Ethereum framework, we're going to see cheaper and faster transactions, which in and of itself is going to make HEX staking a lot more promising going forward, let's say. Because right now, some of the main concerns that eHEX stakers have is that it's expensive and it's slow. So understand that present, we have a lot of people who are staked for quite a few years. The average staking time is up to about 6, nearly 7 years now, I believe. And so eHEX is going nowhere. Nowhere, at least for the next decade, let's say. How price performs relative to pHEX is another thing. But I do believe that if you are present on both chains, that's certainly hedging your own bets against any negative price performance on either chain, while also making sure that you're capitalizing on both chains as well. As we start seeing people migrate potentially their stakes over purely to pHEX, I think then we should see some real price appreciation on pHEX, and that then should take off like a rocket ship. But that's only if it's a lot more user-friendly, let's say, and by that I mean cheaper and faster than eHEX. Because if Ethereum gets to a point where it's almost on par with a Pulse chain, then we're going to see some real value held on both chains, I believe. Now, of course, we're talking years into the future right now. The only common sense approach we can make to this, as soon as this new ecosystem launches in full, is to really see, again, what that price looks like relative to eHEX, what pHEX is settled at, and then what price performance we can potentially see going forward. Because everyone currently staked on eHEX will also have their stake replicated on pHEX as well. So they're not necessarily motivated to exit either chain. They're going to have both of their ducks in a row, and they can simply sit back and wait and see what's actually making the most traction. So while I know this isn't an exact blueprint right now, I don't think it's possible to put a blueprint together right now. We have to keep an ear to the grindstone and play these things as they happen, which is why it's very important to stay tuned on Twitter. It's very important to follow influencers like myself, and there's a lot out there as well giving you their 2 cents as we go forward, just to make sure you're relative. You're taking a temperature read on what that sentiment is and making calls in the moment sometimes. I hope this helped. Please, again, stay patient. Don't panic. I know I've had a lot of messages, a few DMs as well, asking what my take is today, specifically with this SEC thing, and I think it's very short-lived. I think this really adds into the FOMO of, HEX going forward. Certainly plays into the narrative that, HEX is known for, and that is security, that is control of your own assets. And I think that those 2 things alone should, when things settle down and people start getting a lot more bullish about crypto again, or at least about the ecosystem, and I'm talking days, I don't think it's going to be too long until we start seeing that upward momentum again. But I just wanted to rest let you guys rest at ease a little bit and not panic, not get overly emotional. I know a lot of you, are fairly new to crypto as well, judging by some of the questions that are coming in, and that's totally fine. When I first entered the space, I would love it if someone kept reminding me that things are normal. There's no reason to panic. You're in store for a much more runway when it comes to price appreciation with HEX. This is the reason we're getting in. If anything, this dip could be a good point to dollar cost average in. Again, not financial advice, but I'm certainly doing it myself. So stay tuned, and I hope this helped, guys.